The Secret Side of Time, written by Fitriani and Zepani Harasel Cristiano. That morning, the sky over Kalimantan hung too low, as though the forest was hiding something it did not want humans to know. Jenna Jacinta walked slowly through damp grass, her blue flip-flops sidestepping the small puddles that mirrored her own face. She was 22, with long black hair always worn, the loose braid, and eyes that always looked eager, as if the world had something new to offer every single day. Old Darius, as everyone called him, was someone Jenna had never really known. He lived 3 houses from her grandmother's. Mysterious, Jenna thought, but a neighbor is still a neighbor. And so she now stood in the village cemetery. Jenna saw it, just a fraction of a second. The dove was looking at her, or at least, that was how it felt. She looked away. When the prayers were done and people began turning to go, Jenna slung with her backpack, and again and retrieved her grandmother's old bicycle from outside the cemetery fence. Then, halfway along the road, snap! The chain broke. Jenna fell sideways in a meadow, deeply lacking in elegance. Her right knee hit the gravelly ground, her palm scraped across the stone. She tried to fix the chain for the 10 minutes, hopeless. Then the sky changed from light gray to dark gray in minutes, and rain came down like a well. And that was when the white dove appeared again. Then it flew toward the forest. Stop, look back, flew a little further. Stop, look back. She nodded his own sign. She was a final year information technology student, a person who believed in data and logic, who carried a power bank everywhere she went. But something moved her feet without asking information from her brain. She left the full learning against the tree and followed the dove into the forest. The forest was beautiful in a way that felt almost rude. Then the forest opened up. A wide clearing appeared like a hidden place that forest had made for itself alone. Jenna stopped in the center of the clearing. Rain was falling, but it was not falling. Droplets of water hung suspended in the air, as though time had paused at that exact moment they fall from sky. Jenna did not breathe for several seconds. The white dove lay in the branch at the edge of the clearing and looked back at her one final time, as if to say, "This is it." Jenna reached out the finger toward the nearest droplet. The suspended droplets began moving the moment she touched them. The world spun, not like ordinary distance. It was as if everything around her was being pulled toward a direction that had no name. Everything went dark. Jenna opened her eyes with a throbbing head and a shivering body. She reached for her phone. No signal, no Wi-Fi, battery at 67%. She walked, looking for a way out, but the further she went, the more unfamiliar everything felt. Then from the underground to her left came a crashing sound. A wild boar burst out, heading straight for her. In that moment of panic, something fell from the right. A sharp bamboo spur that dropped into the earth precisely between Jenna and the boar. A man stood among the trees. He was around 23, with worm-worn skin. He said nothing. Jenna said nothing. Rain fell between them. Time felt like it was stopped. Then, from the deep in the forest came a large sound. A sun bear. Jenna ran toward the man. She had no other choice. He, without a single word, grabbed Jenna's hand and they ran together. They ran until they reached the base of an impossibly large ironwood tree. When Jenna is talking with him, none saw. Hey, 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 can you hear me? My name is Jenna Jacinta. I'm from Palangkaraya. I got lost. Please help me go back to Palangkaraya. What village is that? Not a village, a city, the provincial capital. There is no city by that name. This is South Kalimantan. This village is Danum Teta. South Kalimantan? This is Central Kalimantan, its own province. There is no such province. What's your name? Pandayananggang. Oh, Pandayananggang. What year is it? I just want to make sure something. 1956. She was in the past. Morning great Jenna with golden light sleeping through the gap in the bamboo. She woke to find Anggang already gone. She climbed down and found him standing below the tree. You're wake up. Yeah, where are we going? Without answering. Could you answer just one question first? The village of Danong Teheta pried from behind the forest like a hidden world. There is Pandaras Thomas Thompson, Anggang's best friend. Pandaras was around 23, with a smile as wide as his face and enough energy to power an entire village. Behind Pandaras, two men who look absolutely identical descends from the veranda at different speeds. The faster one is Sarang and the slower one is Sarung. Then a young woman appeared from inside the house, Hannah. Her eyes moved perfectly to Anggang in a way that said a great deal without saying anything, then returned to Jena, flattening into careful neutrality. And Jena stayed at Pandara's house. His mother, a cheerful, small, frame woman everyone called Mamam Thomas. What impressed the village most though was not the lamp or the camera. What impressed them most was Jena herself, not because of her magical objects, but because of the way she used her head. Pandaras and Jenna has many moments, like when Jenna was showing Anggan her mirrorless camera, and when Jenna and Anggang were both up before anyone else sitting on Pandaras front veranda waiting for the sun to rise. And the funniest incident happened one evening when Jenna, using the little battery remind in her phone, was listening to music through her earphones, one earphone in her ear, the other in Anggang. After a 20-minute negotiation, 3 months, 4 months, 5.
In Jenna's third month at Danum Taheta, Pandaras announced with the enthusiasm of a child on their birthday that they will go to Pahandut, a big market, he said, waving both arms. People from everywhere gathered there. You've never seen anything like it, Jenna. I come from an era with 5-floor shopping malls, said Jenna. Mall what? A very, very big market with shiny floors and air conditioning. Pandaras considered this. I don't know what air conditioning is, but the Pandit market is also very, very big. Trust me. The 5 of them set off. Jena, Pandaras, Sarung by small boat along the Kayan River. Angang came too, though he said he had his own business in Pandit and would not be joining them for the whole day. Business doing what? Asked Pandaras. Business. Very informative, commented Jenna. Jenna stepped off the boat and was immediately struck by the noise of it. Not the noise of a shopping mall smelling of perfume and air conditioning, but the noise smelling of fresh fish, tree resin, tobacco, and wet earth. Traders from various ethnic groups lined the riverbanks. They woven clothes, inland produce, rows of drying salt fish, hand-forged iron forming tools, and merchants from outside Kalimantan bringing goods from Banjarmasin and Surabaya. This is amazing, said Jana, turning her head in every direction. This is genuinely amazing. I told you, said Pandaras, satisfied. Sarang had already disappeared toward the food stalls. Sarang walked more slowly, taking in everything with careful eyes. Jenna took out her camera carefully, not wanting to draw too much attention, and captured a few photographs. People watched with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, but Pandaras quickly explained that it was a picture-making device from a faraway place, and the crowd dispersed fairly quickly. In the middle of all the commotion, Jenna spotted Angang. He was standing with 2 older men, speaking with a seriousness that was different from his usual composed silence. This was an alert expression. Jenna started to approach when Pandaras caught her arm. Don't. Why? Pandaras lowered his voice. Matters I can't explain right now. Later. He smiled, but it was not his usual smile. Let's go look at clothes. Jenna filed the question away for later. Late in the afternoon, on the walk back to the boat, something happened that Pandaras would look about for 2 full days afterward. Angang released her arm and turned away, his face as neutral as ever, but his ears were a shade darker than usual. Hannah was never openly cruel. That was what made her dangerous. She was always present at the right moment with the right smile and the right words. She brought food for Jenna in the early days under the pretext of only being proper to welcome a newcomer. She offered to help Jenna choose clothes more suitable for village life. She taught Jenna a few words in the local language. But Jenna was perceptive enough to notice that not one of those gestures were direct at her. Everyone was performed in front of Angang, or when Angang was within viewing distance, and when Angang was not there, Hannah was different. Not dramatically different. There were no raised voices or harsh words, but there were small comments, slipped in with great care, like thin needles that you don't feel pressing until afterward. You're so clever, Jenna. It's a shame no one here knows your background. Say it with a smile while weaving without looking up. Angang is kind to everyone who comes to this village. There was a trader who passed through before. He helped them the same way. A sentence that looked like ordinary information. You plan to leave eventually, don't you? It would be a pity if people got too close and then you turn out not to be staying. As if this were a statement of fact, not a threat. Jenna did not respond. She had learned from her mother that the most dangerous people are the ones who can make you feel small without you being able to point to exactly what they say. Sarang whispered to her once. Hannah has liked Angang for a long time, since childhood, and Angang never. He stopped. You understand. I don't want to get involved in other people's affairs, said Jenna. Yeah, but those affairs have already gotten involved in yours. One night, Jenna overheard a conversation between Hannah and an older woman she called Auntie, a conversation she was never meant to hear, which happened through the thin wall of Mama Thomas' kitchen while Jenna was getting a drink. That girl won't be here long, Hannah's voice, low and flat. There is no place for her here. Hannah, I'm just saying what's true. Someone like her doesn't fit this life, and Angang knows it. Jenna stood motionless in the darkness, holding her cup of water. The last sentence was the most painful, not because it was cruel, but because it might be true. The Tiwa ceremony began in Jenna's fifth month at Danum Taheta. The whole village dressed up. The woman wore beads and woven clothes bearing hornbill motifs, a bird considered sacred, a symbol of courage and loyalty. The men carried gleaming, well-polished machetes. Gongs were struck from dawn, their rhythm echoing through the entire forest, until even the animals in the deepest jungle seemed to fall still to listen. Jenna wore a cloth borrowed from Mama Thomas, a red woven piece with small hornbill motifs along its edge. Her hair was braided and adorned with red beads. She felt like a character inside a history book, but in the best possible way. The Tiwa ritual lasted several days. Long prayers from the Belian spirit guides, dance depicting the journeys of souls, and offerings arranged with a precision that looked more like art than ceremony. Jenna sat among the villagers, watching with genuine wonder, writing in her notebook during every pose. Anang sat not far away. He did not join the dancing, only observe, but occasionally he would explain something to Jenna in a quiet voice. The meaning of each dance movement, the name of each instrumental being played, the story behind the motifs on the clothes worn by the dancers. This was a different Angang from the usual quiet, watchful one. This was Angang speaking about things he cared about, and he cared very deeply about the land and the customs of the place where he was born. You're proud of all this, Jenna said quietly, not a question. Why wouldn't I be? Angang answered just as quietly. Jenna wrote in her notebook. He talks the most when he talks about his village. There are people whose roots grow so deep you can feel them. He showed it to no one. Beneath the joy of Tiwa, something was not right. Jenna felt it before anyone else. Whispers among the elders, anxious expressions hidden behind smiles. Several children would vanish from their games in the afternoon, then return without being able to explain where they'd gone. A man who came back from the forest with a wound on his arm and refused to explain what had happened. Something's wrong, Jenna told Pandaras during a break in the ceremony. Pandaras lost his smile for a moment. Not now. That night, after the first day of the ceremony and the villagers had returned to their homes, Jenna watched the shadow of Hannah walking toward the southern forest, alone, in the middle of the night. Jenna filed that information away. The next morning, after Jenna found Angang, Pandaras, Sarang, and Sarung in a serious discussion behind the house with an expressions that did not match the mood of the ceremony, she approached them without asking permission. What's happening? Angang looked at her for a moment, then decided to be honest. A group from outside has entered the forest, not to harm. They're looking for something or someone. There's a conflict, Pandora said. More directly, Kalimantan is in a dangerous period. Many parties want the land and resources here. Small villages are often targeted for intimidation or worse. Sarung added quietly. The children who went missing yesterday were found in the forest, frightened. There were strangers who spoke to them, asking about the village schedule. Jenna went quiet. Then she said softly, I saw Hannah going into the forest last night. Everyone fell silent. Angang stared into the distance. His expression did not change, but something in it hardened. The village had calling more and more frequent night meetings, the men beginning to carry their matches everywhere, and not just to the fields, and the old grandmothers murmuring short prayers every time children wandered too far from home. Kalimantan in 1956 was a land in the process of becoming something that had not yet found its own shape. Jenna knew this from history, from books and articles she had read in her future. But knowing something from a book is vastly different from being inside it, from feeling the ground beneath your feet trembling slowly. Amid the tension, life continued in a way that left Jenna astonished. Children still ran and laughed. People still cooked, wove, and sang. There was a wedding at a neighboring village, attended by half of Danum Tahita in their finest clothes. A simple but beautiful ceremony, where the people sat beneath a tree decorated with palm leaves, and people danced until the sun had completely set. Jenna danced too, though her feet were often on the wrong beat. Pandaras looked at her with great affection. Sarung tried to teach her the correct movements, but gave up after 10 minutes. Sarung stood at the edge and watched with an expression that could not be described as sympathetic. And Angang, who never danced, stood at the edge of the field with his arms folded, but his eyes followed wherever Jenna moved. Jenna knew this because every time she looked up from dancing, those eyes were already there. After the celebration ended and people began heading home, Jenna walked beside Angang on the return to Danum Taheta. The night was clear with an almost full moon, bright enough to walk without torches. You didn't dance, said Jenna. I can't dance. You don't want to learn? No. Jenna considered her next word. Why were you watching the dancing area the whole time? A fairly long silence. Jenna turned back to the road and smiled at the darkness ahead of them. It was in this period of tension that Hannah made her mistake. Jenna didn't know at first what she noticed what that one day Pandaras came to where she was teaching the children with an unusual expression. Jenna didn't know at first. What she noticed was that one day Pandaras came to where she was teaching the children with an unusual expression, a mixture of anger and worry that he was attempting to hide behind his normal smile, without quite managing it. We need to talk later, he whispered. About what? Later. Later turned out to be midnight, and the back veranda of Pandara's house with the sound of crickets covering their voices. Sarung was there. Sarang was there. Angang was there. Hannah has been feeding information to the group from the south for at least 2 months, said Angang, and a voice flatter than usual, read in a way that felt heavier than shouting would have. The guard rotation schedule, the unguarded river routes, the times the village has fewest people. Sarung, in the corner, stared at the floor. I had been suspicious for 2 months. The way she walked at night was different from someone who simply couldn't sleep. What has she given them? Asked Jenna. And now to make this village far easier to attack than it should be. Silence fell between them like something heavy. Hannah was frightened. Jenna said at last, not in her defense, but because she needed to say it. They must have threatened her. Yes, said Angang. But fear doesn't change what has already happened. No one could argue that. When Hannah was confronted the next day, in a manner that was not accusatory, but could not be denied, she did not fight it. She simply sat with her hands in her lap and told the story, the threats, the fear, the decision made in panic that she then didn't know how to undo. Jenna sat and listened, and she felt something she had not expected. Not victory, not satisfaction, that Hannah had turned out to be untrustworthy after all. What she felt was simple sadness about how fear can lead people to make choices that destroy more than one thing at once. Ang left the room without a word. Jenna followed him outside. Ang stopped but did not turn. This isn't your fault. Silence. You can't control other people's choices. I can't control how prepared we are to face the consequence. He finally turned, and Jenna saw something on his face he rarely showed. Exhaustion. Not physical tiredness, the kind that accumulates quietly from being the person others depend on for too long. We need to move quickly. What do you need me to do? Ang looked at her for a moment. You don't have to. Don't tell me I don't need to be involved. Jenna stood straighter. I've been here nearly a year. This is my home too. A brief silence. Help with the evacuation, said Ang at last. You know who needs the most help moving quickly. The children, the elderly. Make sure they know the northern route. Jenna nodded. Okay. Ang turned to leave. Stop, turned slightly back, but not all the way. Jenna. Yes. Be careful. 2 words, but the way he said them, carrying a weight disproportionate to their number, left Jenna standing in place for several seconds after he was gone. When Hannah was confronted by Ang, by Pandaras, by Sarung, who spoke in the quietest but heaviest voice of all, she wept. She spoke of the threats she had received, of someone from the outside group who had come to her nearly 3 months ago, threatening her family, of the fears she had carried alone because she didn't know who to tell, of the small pieces of information she had given away because she thought they wouldn't hurt anyone, the guard schedule, the entry routes into the village, the times when the village was most unguarded. Jenna stood at the edge of the room, listening to Hannah explain herself, and felt complicated mixture of anger and compassion, because the threats may have been real, the fear may have been real, but the damage done by a choice made from fear is still damage. No one raised their voice at Hannah. Ang turned and left after hearing everything. Pandra sat with his head in his hands. Sarung stared at the floor. Hannah stopped crying and sat in silence, more painful than any shouting. We can't wait any longer, said Ang from outside. They already know too much. They did not have much time. Ang organized things without drama, without long speeches, just clear and economical instruction. Evacuating part of the village to the north toward a more hidden location, while the men who could fight formed a protective perimeter. Jenna helped. She carried a crying child, while that grandmothers who walked slowly carried loads too heavy for one person. They reached the northern forest when the first sound came, a sound that was not a good one. The attackers were more numerous than estimated. Ang split the group. Pandaras took the majority of the villagers toward the upper river. Ang himself, together with Jenna, Sarang, and Sarung, moved through a narrower path between the great trees. They ran, they hid, waited in the dark beneath enormous roots, holding their breath as footsteps passed them at uncomfortably close range. At one of their hiding spots, Sarung whispered to Sarang, "We need to create a diversion. I go left, you go right." "No," Sarung gripped his hand tightly. "We're not splitting up. We can lead everyone to safety if they can track our direction." Sarung looked at his twin. Their eyes were identical. "I always know the way back," and before Sarung could stop him, Sarung had gone left into the darkness. The sound of running, the sound of a shout, then a silence heavier than any sound. Sarung pressed his own hand over his mouth. His shoulders shook without making a sound. Jenna placed her hand on Sarang's back, saying nothing, because there were no words, and Sarang gave a small nod with his eyes still closed. Ang looked in the direction Sarung had gone. His jaw tightened. He said nothing, but something in his eyes fractured in a way that was very quiet and very deep. They kept moving. They found their gathering point, a spot beside the river that was well hidden, where Pandaras had already arrived with his group. A small fire burned under a rock overhang, so it would not be seen from above. Exhausted, frightened faces gathered there, but they were not safe. Not yet. The attackers were smarter than anticipated. They did not strike from one direction, but encircled slowly, like water filling a space, and they found the gathering point. The attack came at the darkest hour before dawn. Jenna could not describe what happened next in any organized way, nor could anyone. There were screams, sounds of fighting, fire larger than it should have been, people running in all directions. Ang fought in the center of it all in a way that made Jenna understand that he was not simply a quiet man. He was a man who knew exactly what he was protecting and why. Jenna ran alongside Mama Thomas, and two small children who clung to her side. She pulled them behind a great tree, pressing her trembling hand over the mouth of a child about to cry. Pandaras was injured in the arm, but still on his feet, still making sure people kept moving. Sarang was near Angang, protecting the other flank, and then Jen saw someone moving toward her from an angle she had not anticipated. She ran, not fast enough. Something struck her back, a hard blow that tilted the wall sideways. Jenna fell to her knees. The earth beneath her felt different, colder, and among the trees spinning in her panic, she glimpsed something glimmering in the air, suspended droplets of water. No. Jenna reached for the ground, tried to stand. Her hand touched cold air between the droplets of frozen rain, and the world spun again. Jenna collapsed on the floor. Jenna collapses on the forest floor. Her right hand was clenching something small and hard. A dark blue bead, a seed from Angang's woven bracelet, given to her the night before everything happened. Keep this, so you remember this was real. Rain fell on her, ordinary rain, warm from the sky of 2026. Her phone was silent. She did not try to turn it on. She lay there for a long time. Then she sat up. Then she stood. Then she walked out of the forest with feet that still remember how to walk. Even if her head and chest were still somewhere very far away, the fool was still leaning against the tree, its chain still broken. The rain had faded to a light drizzle. Jenna pushed the bicycle home. She cried in a way she could not stop. Not dramatic sobbing, just tears that kept flowing because her body didn't know any other way to process nearly a year compressed into 2 hours. In her room, she sat on the floor, her back against the bed, the blue bead in her palm. Real, always real. The days that followed, Jenna spent on the internet, on a phone with weak village signal, still upon one reference after another. The formation of Central Kalimantan Province, the history of interior village, small conflicts that never made it into national textbooks, but were documented in local archives and missionary records. She found one entry about an incident at a village mentioned only by the name of its river, the Danum River, in late 1956. A short paragraph in a partially translated Dutch report. An armed conflict between local inhabitants and an unidentified group. Several casualties. The village subsequently relocated farther north. Several casualties. Jenna read it over and over. No names, no list. She searched deeper in a local document, scanned and uploaded by a Kalimantan history researcher, one that was already brittle and not fully legible. There was a list of names, incomplete, but there, Jenna read them one by one. Her chest grew heavier with each one. She recognized names, Sarang, Mama Thomas, two other names from the village, and at the end of the list, in smaller writing like an addendum, one's names and at the end of the list, in smaller writing like an addendum, names of those who died later, including the unidentified, a young woman, unknown origin, found at the riverside alongside other victims. Jenna put her down. Jenna put her phone down. Jenna put her phone down. She was on that list, but she was also here, in her grandmother's room in 2026, holding a blue bead in her hand. And the name Pandahan Angang, it was not anywhere in the entire document, not on the casualty list, not anywhere. He had survived, he had endured. Jenna closed her phone screen and held a long, slow breath. Of course he survived. He was the kind of person. Of course he survived. He was the kind of person who does. Jenna did not go straight home after leaving the forest. She sat at the edge of that red dirt road, the same road where the fool's chain had snapped, which felt like centuries ago, despite being only a few hours, and simply said, the rain had stopped. The sky was golden orange, the color of an afternoon that did not know there was someone beneath it who had just lost nearly a year from two different directions of time. She counted what she had brought back. One backpack whose contents were the same as when she entered. One dead phone, one camera with an unknown remaining charge, and one small blue bead in her palm. She counted what she had left behind. A notebook full of drawings and notes about a village that doesn't exist on any 2026 map. Sketches of faces that don't appear in any historical photographs, and a folded pieces of paper in the corner of a wooden case in a room in Pandra's house, with a drawing of a face she would not find anywhere except inside her own head. Jenna stood, took the full started pushing. At her grandmother's house, she showered thanks at the dinner Grandma had prepared while watching a soap opera on the small television in the corner of the room. The sound of the soap opera, dramatic dialogue, excessive sound effects, and an advertisement for hair care products felt like a foreign language from a different planet. Why are you so quiet? Grandma asked. Tired, Grandma. I fell off the bicycle earlier. That knee? Grandma pointed. Tomorrow we put some antiseptic on it. Yes, Grandma. Normal. Everything felt so completely normal that Jenna didn't know if that was comforting or the most suffocating thing of all. Normal. Everything felt so completely normal that Jenna didn't know if that was comforting or the most suffocating thing of all. She charged her phone through the night. The next morning, with full battery and 3 bars of signal, a luxury after nearly a year without either, she started searching. First, Central Kalimantan history, 1956, conflict interior. Second, Pahandut, 1956, trade, settlement. Third, formation of Central Kalimantan province, early village. Fourth, Danum River, and seventh, 1956. She found a quite a lot academics article, scanned archive journals from local history researchers who had patiently documented things the national history considered unimportant. She read all of it, with eyes that grew increasingly tired and a feeling she could not break down into a single word. Pahandut was there, the lively trading center that later became the seat of Palangkaraya. The Tiwa ceremony was there, described by researchers in academic vocabulary that somehow felt drier than the way Angang had explained it at the edge of a celebration field. The small conflicts of the provincial formation years were there too, in various versions of various perspectives, and that local document, scanned by a history student from Palangkaraya University 10 years ago for a thesis, contained all this that made Kiana's hand stop scrolling. She read it 3 times to be sure. The names she knew were there, names that appear in no history book anywhere, that exist only in a small archives almost no one reads, and among those names, in the right most column-headed notes, Pendehan Angang, not listed as a casualty, whereabouts after the incident unknown. Jenna closed her eyes, drew a long breath. Not listed as a casualty, whereabouts unknown, which meant he had lived, he had escaped that night, and after that he had gone, wherever no one knew, built a life that was not documented, had children and great-grandchildren, until one line of their family married and had a child, and that child had a child who was then named Darius and lived in the same village as Jenna's grandmother. 3 houses from an old wooden fence thick with ferns. Jenna opened her eyes. She looked at the bluebird in her hand, still there, still real after all of this, and for the first time since she had walked out of the forest, she smiled in a way that was entirely genuine. A month after Jenna returned, her mother told her that old Darius' grandchild was coming. Please welcome him well, dear. He's come all this way alone. Jenna nodded without thinking too much about it. She was still in the state that could be described as functioning but not entirely present. She ate, slept, helped her grandmother, but her thoughts often drifted to places she couldn't point to on any map. That afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Jenna, go open it up, please. Her mother called from the kitchen. Jenna walked to the door with her mind still wandering, opening it with one hand while the other still held her phone, and she froze. A man stood at her door, holding a box of cakes, around 25 years old, with warm brown skin and arm muscles visible even though the blue flannel shirt he wore. His hair was neater than she had always imagined for that face, and he was looking at Jenna with an expression that was calm and slightly puzzled, because the girl in front of him had suddenly gone completely still. Not him, not exactly him, but like someone made from the same mold, with adjustment made by 70 years. The same cheekbones, the same jaw, and those eyes. The same cheekbones, the same jaw, and those eyes, dark and deep, that look in a way that made you feel as if all the nails around you had suddenly stopped. Hi, he said. I am Jenna, Pa Darius' grandson. Your mother said I could. Come in, said Jenna, quickly. Come in, said Jenna's mother quickly from inside. In. Put the cakes on the table. Jenna came in, said, spoke with Jenna's mother in a manner that was polite and warm. Someone raised a wail. You could tell by how he sat and listened, and Jenna sat across from him, watching him in a way that, if she wasn't careful, would look very suspicious. Jeno. Jenna said at last, in a voice quieter than usual. What is your full name? He looked at her. Jeno Angang. Why? The world felt like it stopped. Angang. Jenna placed her hands on the table. In her pocket. Jenna placed her hands on the table. In her pocket. Her fingers closed around the small blue bead, a seed from a wooden bracelet, the color of a dark blue, almost black, that had been with her since that night beside the river. Your grandfather. Jenna sighed quietly. What was his name? Your great-great-grandfather, I mean. Jenna looked slightly puzzled by the question, but answered politely. My grandfather's name was Darius, but my dad used to tell stories about the ancestors from grandfather's side. Someone from a village, deep in the interior. His name was, he thought for a moment, Pendehen. Pendehen Angang, a great-great-grandfather from the grandfather's line. Silence. Jenna's mother was talking about something. Cakes, the weather, plans for staying. But Jenna was not listening. She was only looking at the man across from her who had the same eyes, the same depth, the same quiet steadiness. I always know the way back, Sarong has said before going into the darkness. Keep this, so you remember this was real. Angang had said before he let go of her hand. And Jenna understood at last. Not everything ends. Some things only change form, passing through different hands, different faces, names that are slightly different, traveling across very long time to arrive at the right door. He had survived. He had a child. That child had a child, and the child of that child now sat across from Jenna and asked, Are you alright? Because Jenna had been staring at him in silence for far too long. Jenna drew a breath, smiled, not a pretend smile, but one from somewhere deep. That was a little painful, and also a relief in a way she could not explain to anyone in this room. Yes, she said, I'm alright. In her pocket, the small blue bead was warm against her palm. Real, always real.